This is the Uptick Network Stock Day Podcast, sponsored by InvestorsHangout.com. Penny stock news and interviews from the microcap world. Public information on OTC, pink sheets, and microcap stocks from around the world. With your host, Everett Jolly.
On today's show, we have a very exciting guest with us. He is Ross Orr. He is the CEO of BacTech Environmental Corp. They trade on the OTC pink sheets under the ticker symbol BCCEF. They also trade on the CSE under the ticker symbol BAC. Ross, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I want to go over a little bit of your background, a little bit of background of your company to start off, and then I want to get into some Q&A today.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
My background actually stems from the securities industry. I was with RBC Dominion Securities for 10 or 12 years, but I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. So I've split off, and with some other cohorts, we started a company that started to finance resource companies, biotech companies, usually at the private stage, and then passing them on to the public arena. I fell in love with one company, though, and that's this one, and I ended up running it. It's like the Victor Kiam. You know, I liked it so much I bought the company.
Right.
These guys approached us back in, I think, around 1995, 96, with the idea of moving to Canada from Australia, where because of the access to capital. We put the company together, took it public. Really was operating more on a licensing basis in those days, where we would license our technology, and in return we'd get a fee plus a small royalty. The spacing of those projects was too far apart, so we decided we had to change the business model, and that was to change it to where we acquire an equity stake in the project and therefore make a lot more money for the shareholders than just getting a simple royalty. In 2010, we then went on and split the company in half, because we were trying to market a mining process and an environmental process, and the market said, hey, you got to be one or the other. You can't be a green company in mining. It just doesn't jive, and your investor base is different.
It's almost an oxymoron.
Yeah, exactly. So what I did was I spun this company out, the BacTech Environmental, to the shareholders, and I with it. On the understanding that it's a lot easier to find something that's sitting on the surface than something that sits 500 meters under the ground, and a lot cheaper. So that's brought us to where we are today.
You know, I wanted to ask you a question, you know, and I was going over some of your reports and stuff like that. And for myself, educate myself and my listeners, what exactly is bio-leaching technology? And do you guys own the patent of that? I noticed that you guys have the royalty. Could you expand on that a little bit? Sure.
Bio-leaching in its simplest form is our tagline, our bugs eat rocks, and that's really what they do. You're taking naturally occurring bacteria that live on rock outcrops, you know, on a daily basis. They sort of come to life when the conditions are optimal for them. Things such as temperature, a bit of moisture, and they literally start to devour sulfides. And the sulfides, basically, when they break down, then release the metal for recovery. So what we're doing is we're taking, I jokingly like to say, we're taking a non-unionized workforce and speeding them up from, say, 20 years to 6 days. So we give them that Garden of Eden in which to live, and then they go to work on the concentrates that we put into these tanks and break down the sulfides, thereby releasing the metal for recovery. So there's no gases. It's called a hydrometallurgical approach, as opposed to a pyro, which is smelting and roasting, that does cause, you know, arsenic trioxide gases and sulfide gases, etc. But realistically, what we use it for in BacTech Environmental is to take those sulfides out of the tailings, the things that are causing the acid rock drainage problems, take those out and put them into the bio-leach tanks, and then oxidize them using the bacteria and get paid for your work by virtue of selling the metals that you've recovered.
I see. I understand you guys have the royalty-free rights, but do you actually own this technology?
Well, there's a company called Aquila, which is Okay, so just back up to when I had the two companies. We split them in two. One became RebGold, RebGold, which stands for rock-eating bacteria, believe it or not. And they were acquired by a company called Aquila. Now, the technology stays in that company because they just said they wouldn't let me take it with me to the environmental side. So I said, fine, I want a royalty-free, perpetual license to the technology for anything related to, acid mine cleanup, tailings reclamation, that sort of thing. And then I went back again and actually said to them, I want more. I want to be able to actually license this technology to producing mines that need the technology to treat arsenopyrite. Arsenopyrite is what we process, right? And the reason we go after arsenopyrite is when we split apart that matrix of iron, sulfur, gold, and arsenic, the iron and the arsenic band together into what is called a ferric arsenate, which is a U.S. EPA-approved landfillable material. So that's why we're targeting all this stuff in South America, because of the high levels of arsenic that are being used by these miners.
My guest today is Ross Orr. He is the CEO of BacTech Environmental Corp. They trade on the OTC pink sheets under the ticker symbol BCCEF. They also trade on the CSE under the ticker symbol BAC. How do you define the space in which BacTech operates? I mean, it sounds like you guys got your fingers in a couple of things.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's environmental. We don't like being called a mining company because we're not. We're not mining anything. We're just reprocessing something that somebody else made a mess of, 70, 80 years ago. We do find the older stuff is better, obviously, because of the technology used to take metal out back then is not as good as it is today. So that's how we define ourselves, as an environmental reclamation company.
In the mining space, correct?
In the mining space, correct.
Outstanding.
At this time.
In May, you guys got around $500,000 private placement. I'm sure that's going to strengthen the balance sheets, but what do you guys plan on doing with that money?
Well, it's specifically targeted towards getting Bolivia into production. So in Bolivia, we've got this pile sitting there of 600,000 tons on one side of the river, which is, as I said earlier, a jewelry box. I mean, there were $100 million of the metal in it. And across the river, you've got a much bigger pile of 4 million tons that has not as much metal into it. So the idea is to get onto this smaller pile, drill a grid, like a 20-meter grid, and keeping in mind that you're drilling sand, basically, and they're only 30-foot holes. So we take all the information that we get from this drilling program, and we make a composite sample, and then we start doing our metallurgical work. I mean, this pile contains silver, copper, tin, gold, albeit relatively small amounts, but it is there.
Absolutely.
And tin. So the recoveries here are what the metallurgical work is all about. How do we get the most metal out of these tailings relatively inexpensively? And it's not a bio-leach candidate, by the way. Just I want to go on the record. At this stage, given the fact it's Bolivia, and we saw an opportunity to get a relatively inexpensive process, which would be gravity and flotation, to process material that's going to generate a cash flow like within 12 months. And it's Bolivia, so it's a soft entry to the country. We know there's another 25 much bigger projects there that, depending on the success of this one, will determine whether or not we go forward into doing more projects in Bolivia.
That
brings, so that 500,000 takes us right up to where the shovel goes in the ground. That includes engineering and everything else that goes with it.
Well, that brings me to my next question. I was looking over your balance sheet and everything. So you guys haven't started monetizing, correct? You have no revenues coming in. This project is going to bring those revenues coming in?
That would be our first revenue-generating one for BacTech Environmental, correct?
All right.
Now, we've built plants before.
Right.
I mean, we've built, yeah.
And you see these revenues coming on your balance sheet on what quarter?
I would hope. We're in June now. I would say we're probably going to be involved in processing, test work, metallurgy, and all that until December, till the end of the year. At which time, then, if we start building in January, we would be processing probably the beginning of the second quarter of next year.
Right. So we're looking at March or April.
Right. And the deal is, and by the way, my partner is the Bolivian government. So is the old expression,
Wow.
better to know,
Yeah, right.
who you are. It's Comibol, which is the state mining company. So the deal and this deal took 18 months to negotiate, and it's nothing more than I'm just dealing with bureaucrats. I mean, I hope no one's listening down there, but the reality is that the contract is now done. It allows for us to bring the capital and the know-how to build the plant. They provide power. There's a railway there. There's workforce, and the two groups come together to put this project together. We get all the cash flow for the first 18 months, or when our debt is retired. So whichever is sooner. So they basically recognize that this thing has to be financed off their balance sheet by us, and so therefore we get 100% of the cash flow to pay ourselves back or to pay our lenders back. And then it goes 55-45 in their favor because that's the law in Bolivia.
I want to change gears here for a second and talk about something that usually a lot of mining companies really don't want to talk about. Tell us a little bit about mercury use in arsenal mining and why that's a problem in your industry.
Well, mining companies like big deposits where they can put a big hole in the ground and produce hundreds of thousands of ounces on an annual basis, and I can't argue with that. That's good economics. But what happens in places like Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, up into Central America, Costa Rica, Honduras, is that you have these artisanal miners that literally go out every day with a pick and a shovel and a little bit of dynamite, and they mine their rabbit hole, and they produce maybe a ton of rock a day, but effectively that rock contains very high grade gold, because these are narrow quartz veins that mining companies wouldn't bother to go after. They need a place to process that material. So what they do, unfortunately, is they use mercury as an amalgamator for gold and silver. And when they when they make this amalgam, then they burn it, which of course they want to burn off the mercury, which creates mercury gas, and you effectively get people that are dying from mercury poisoning. If nothing else, shaking like a leaf and dead by the age of 30. So the part of the problem is that they use this mercury on arsenopyrite, which is what is called refractory. If you can imagine your fist with the gold inside. If you're trying to use cyanide to get at the gold, you can't because it's not being exposed to the cyanide. And that's where biolithene comes along to break open that fist, and then you can use cyanide to make the recovery. What they do is they use mercury on arsenopyrite, and they get 5 to 10% of the gold, and then they throw it away. They throw it in rivers. They throw it over their shoulders. There's two major rivers coming out of Ecuador to Peru that are totally polluted because of mercury and arsenic. So what we're trying to say to them is, look, we'll buy your material off you for a lot more money than you're getting from the Chinese or the local processor, but bring it to us without mercury on it so that we can do our work, and we'll pay you a lot more money than you're getting now. So this is conceptual. I mean, I have an agreement with a company called Duran Ventures to do some test work on some rock they have found in northern Peru, with the idea that we would build a bioleach plant at their flotation plant in northern Peru. So that's sort of the next phase for us is to sort of spread out into this anti-mercury world.
My guest today has been Ross Orr. He is the CEO of BacTech Environmental Corp. They trade on the OTC pink sheets under the ticker symbol BCCEF. In closing, Ross, is there anything that you would like to discuss with my listeners that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
No, I just, we're a very inexpensive company. Our market cap is small. We think we can finance a lot of these projects with debt, which shouldn't lead to a lot of dilution going forward. And hopefully a year from now, people are going to be looking at us on a cash flow multiple as opposed to on a minuscule multiple.
All right. My guest today is Ross Orr. He is the CEO of BacTech Environmental Corp. They trade on the OTC pink sheets under the ticker symbol BCCEF. They also trade on the CSE under the ticker symbol BAC. Appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.